Hello everyone, welcome back to Conservation Nomad. For those of you that follow me on Instagram, you will have seen my story where I talk about how I'm going to start a new YouTube series where basically I'll be reading an article once a week about conservation or wildlife or something related, and I will be reacting to it and putting in my own info as well. So let me know if you like that idea by commenting below. Also, if you follow me on Instagram, you will have seen that I posted an image, this one here, where I talk about this necklace. So while I was doing research on this to see the ecological impact it has, the ethical aspect, and also what's the difference between real shells and fake ones, I came upon this article that I'll be reading today. So I haven't read it. I just read the title, which is called Seashell Souvenirs Are Killing Protected Marine Life, and it's by National Geographic. So that's what I'm going to be reading and reacting to today. I hope you enjoy. Let's jump right into it.
Here is a shell. You may have seen similar shells in your neighbor's living room, religious spaces, or even in your bathroom. Ever stop to wonder where they come from?
As I said, the title is called Seashell Souvenirs Are Killing Protected Marine Life. The seashell trade is little known, but the massive industry devastates marine life worldwide. In the little coastal town of Kanyakumari in southern India, mountains of newly harvested mollusk shells, living animals still inside them, lie drying out near a sun-drenched beach. Next up for these seashells, a dunking for a few hours in a large vat of oil and acid to clean them. Any remaining flesh or scaly growth is then scraped off each shell by hand by one of the hundreds of local workers, and they're given another soaking in oil. After a final hand polishing, many are shipped to artisans in nearby towns who craft jewelry and other mementos to sell to tourists. The remaining shells are destined for elsewhere in India and abroad. I mean, that was just the first paragraph, and already I'm not happy about this at all. Like, I don't know what I expected. I think it's one of those things where the truth is too inconvenient, so we try not to think about it. Like, when I bought these, I honestly thought they weren't real because it was only like 5 euros. But if I really sit and think about it, they feel pretty real, they look pretty real, and if they are bought from countries like India or other countries in Asia, then why would I expect them to be more expensive? I just don't think I expected the process to be so like savage or to be described like that, maybe, let's say, because I think we all know that nothing living wants to die for us to wear or eat or consume or anything, but it's like making that connection. And now reading this definitely made a connection. Beyond that, says Amy Banson, who witnessed the mass collection and processing of mollusks in Kanyakumari firsthand in 2014, it's cruel because the shells are very much alive.
Shells are the skeletons of soft-bodied animals called mollusks. The skeletons of mollusks grow around their bodies to protect them. Mollusks are filter feeders cleaning the ocean of all its small debris. They are partners in reef building. The small shells contain creatures who also keep the beaches clean.
I mean, I don't think I have to say something about that. Just put yourself in that position. Can you imagine being put in hot oil alive and then being scraped? Oh, I can't even. Before continuing, it said above that is scraped off each shell by hand by one of hundreds of local workers. So another ethical aspect about that is the workers. I doubt they're working and being paid fairly and working in humane situations. So if you don't care that much about the animals or the environment, at least consider the humans in this situation. It's also stated that for many of the species found here, the industry is illegal under Indian law. Banson was a graduate student when he visited Kanyakumari for his thesis project, which started as an inquiry into the livelihood of shell artisans and morphed into what he calls a framework for a movement against the exploitation and mindless destruction of marine life. Banson had expected to speak with a few artisans and learn about their craft, but was flabbergasted by what he saw. The factory workers showed him around a processing center and a massive open warehouse with high gates and security. As soon as we opened those tall gates, all I could see truckloads, heap after heap of seashells, everywhere as far as the eye could see. And that really put things into perspective for me, he says. That's when the scale of this hit me in the face. One worker told him that his facility processes anywhere from 30 to 100 tons of shells a month. And Banson says several other such facilities exist in southern India. The dozens of shell species they handle range from the spider conch to the green turban. Both species are listed under India's Wildlife Protection Act and therefore illegal to harvest in the country. So it also ties into the illegal wildlife trade. Great. According to Banson, the shells are packaged by the kilogram and sold to craftsmen as raw material for souvenirs and other handicraft products. The supply chain varies from town to town. For example, shells may move from a factory in Kanyakumari to an artist's home or shop nearby. In the case of less touristy towns such as Rameshwaram, I hope I didn't butcher that, he says larger processing factories send their shells to middlemen who sell them to artists in places like Kanyakumari. Shells from Rameshwaram are also exported overseas or to larger Indian cities such as Vizag and Mumbai. The global scale of shell trade. Oh God, that was just for India. Okay. Let's continue. At least 50,000 mollusk species inhabit the earth. Whereas some shells are harvested for their meat, others, like the chambered nautilus, known for its beautiful, quite multicolored protective casings, are collected solely for decorative purposes. India is by no means the only major supplier. Local news reporters from GMA News Online in the Philippines describe similar processes there for harvesting, cleaning, and distributing shells. Shells are also exploited commercially in Indonesia and throughout the Caribbean, among other places. Only a few species, notably the queen conch, which can grow to a foot in length, the chambered nautilus, the giant clam, and a few species of snails, are protected under the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, CITES, the body that regulates the global wildlife trade. I have a video, well, not on CITES, but on illegal wildlife trade, and I talk about CITES there. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. I'll put the link somewhere above. Reading on, to trade these species, importers must obtain a permit from the country of origin, which is registered in an international database. In addition, CITES requires the source countries set fishing quotas to ensure that trade in these species is sustainable. Like India, a number of other countries have implemented their own policies to protect marine mollusks. Despite these measures, according to a 2016 study by Defenders of Wildlife, a US-based nonprofit, mollusk shells are one of the most heavily confiscated wildlife products at US ports of entry. Between 2005 and 2014, US Fish and Wildlife Services agents confiscated 77 different types of wildlife products and shells, with more than 500,000 seized apparently in the top 5. Mollusk-derived shell products accounted for about 42% of all items. Let that sink in. Failure to obtain an import permit or attempting to import more items than allowed per permit is a common reason for confiscation. Okay, but I also hope that other than confiscating, they get like a fine or prison time or something, because just being confiscated is clearly not enough punishment. According to Alejandra Goyanechea, I totally butchered her name, I'm so sorry, Senior International Council for Defenders of Wildlife, more than 90% of shell products seized by the Fish and Wildlife Services during that period were sourced from the wild, and nearly 99% were intended for commercial purposes. The queen conch, with its spiral, shiny pink and orange or cream shell that can measure up to a foot long, is one of the most recognizable protected mollusks. According to a 2016 Defenders of Wildlife fact sheet, queen conches with no paperwork or improper paperwork accounted for more than 90% of all shells from Latin America that were confiscated by Fish and Wildlife Services between 2005 and 2014. Undocumented trade on such a scale has the potential to put wild populations in jeopardy, which makes sense because people are just gonna go out there and harvest them and sell them for profit without it being any moderation, and they're just going to be wiped out as a species. There's an impact on the environment. It's not the same to bring 2 shells as 1,000 shells. Make sense? When those myriad shells used for jewelry and decorative items like lamps and picture frames had living animals inside them in the ocean, they served a variety of ecological roles, including providing an anchorage for amphibians like algae that provided food for marine life, and for filter feeding barnacles, which help clean the water. The queen conch plays an important role in its ecosystem by helping cleanse the Caribbean's waters and providing food for animals like the loggerhead sea turtle and nurse shark. Not to mention that scientists consider mollusks to be excellent indicators of overall ecosystem health. So basically, by buying this and supporting this, not only are we killing the poor animal that lived in here, but we're also destroying the habitat in a lot of other marine species which depend on these organisms to keep their habitat clean and healthy and to have food for them. Without this, the ecosystem doesn't function. Elephants and tigers and lions are such big, beautiful animals. I feel like we all love and want to protect them. Whereas these are more small and insignificant. So we're like, oh, whatever, it's not a big deal. There's so many of them or whatever. We don't see them maybe even as living or having any worth. But I'm trying to show that they have major worth, maybe more than these animals we love so much, because they provide the base for all other living species. Like any exploitation of the natural world, if you take out more from the environment that is sustainable, then the environment and the ecosystem collapse. Amy Bansand says shell fishermen in India often use a fishing technique similar to bottom trawling.
Increasing their destructive powers, many fishing fleets use a method known as bottom trawling in order to catch even more fish and marine life, leaving behind a path of destruction along the seabed. Where there was once a living community of marine life rich in biodiversity, a wasteland takes its place.
This is done. Living habitat in its path is crushed, ripped up, or smothered as the seabed is turned over. It's unclear how widespread bottom trawling is in the global mollusk fishing industry. So again, terrible because habitat destruction. The enforcement challenge. The chambered nautilus native to the South Pacific is probably the mollusk most affected by this shell trade. Little is known about the species, which was given CITES protection only as recently as 2017, 2 years ago, and is especially vulnerable because unlike, say, giant clams, they can't be bred in captivity to replenish diminishing wild populations. According to a 2016 study by Traffic and the World Wildlife Fund, global trafficking nautiluses is rampant. The study notes that the illegal trade has shifted from shops openly displaying them to internet sales, which are harder to monitor and control. The study also identifies the policing of the chambered nautilus trade in China, the Philippines, and Indonesia as a particular challenge. In India, the Wildlife Protection Act aims to safeguard a handful of increasing rare mollusk species. But Amy Bansand says enforcement is haphazard and protected shells are sold openly on beaches to consumers and artists, while others are exported across the globe. Sadly, he says, lack of information makes it harder for officials to stop the trade in even the endangered shell varieties. This is compounded by the fact that port authorities don't really understand or acknowledge this as a problem. To them, it's just raw material. So it goes back to what I said. Because of them being so small, we don't even consider them living. We don't see their importance. According to Goyonechea, identifying mollusk species is one of the toughest challenges in policing the international trade in seashells. During the customs process, importers often simply list their goods as shells, and the few inspectors at most ports of entry are expert enough to identify protected species. The 2016 Traffic and World Wildlife Fund study, which focused on nautilus shells, backs up this assertion. So basically, this is the problem with most of the illegal wildlife trade, is that there isn't enforcement of the policy. So we might have the policies, we might have the rules and the laws, but there's no enforcement of it. And without enforcement, of course, people don't care enough. It notes that in Europe, China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, shells have the same species or genus custom codes as coral and other mollusks and echinoderms, and that monitoring the mollusk trade isn't a priority for authorities. The absence of customs codes to track international trade and the absence of market measures to ensure that the trade is legal mask the overall volume of harvest and trade that is occurring, the report says. Bansett estimates that 30,000 to 40,000 people in Kanyakumari region are involved in the shell business. Now, this is another problem, because when you want to protect a species, again, same with wildlife crime and other animals involved in the illegal wildlife trade, you need to consider the people too. There are a lot of people that their livelihoods depend on this trade. And we can't just discard them as much as we think it's wrong or we don't like it. We can't just be like, whatever, I don't care. These people need to find a way to survive. And the best way to find a balance is to give them a different solution, a maybe more eco-friendly solution. For example, if they were to catch a poacher, they would basically go through training to make them into a ranger, because most poachers or in general people that are involved in the illegal wildlife trade, it's not that they want to purposely hurt these animals or cause harm, it's just that they don't have another solution as to how to live and take care of their family. If you provide them with a solution, then obviously they're going to take that, and it'd be even better to provide them with a solution that is sustainable for them and their family, but also for the environment. So put those together. Anyway, he says he tried for years to attract investors to start a campaign that would educate communities about the damage done by the shell trade and would train local artists to adopt an alternative craft, creating glass-blown shells instead of using mollusks. But no one stepped up and his efforts languished. Another important thing is awareness. A lot of people, not only in these regions, but globally, are not aware of the damage the illegal wildlife trade does, not only to the animals, not only to their habitats, but to us as well. So raising awareness is very, very important. And even so, very often people don't care because they don't think it has an immediate effect on them. That's why, as I said, for me, I think the best thing to do is provide a better solution, both for the people and for the ecosystem. Garrick Maidman says securing funding for less flashy wildlife species is very difficult. This is what I talked about. Mollusks and other marine curios like seahorses don't have the same appeal as elephants, tigers, and pandas, he says, adding that as a result, it's therefore hard to get those in power to take notice. What's crucially needed is to reduce demand for decorative shells and other trinkets by spreading awareness among consumers of the dangers of overexploiting mollusks. So I think I've talked about this before. I did my master's research on demand reduction of sea turtle products. And what I found through that is that demand reduction is probably the best way to combat illegal wildlife trade, because you can put all the fines in the world, you can put all the punishment in the world, you can enforce it, you can increase security, you can do breeding problems, conservation programs, yada, yada, yada. But as long as there's demand for a product, people are always going to find a way to sell that product. So the most effective way, for me at least, is to decrease demand for all wildlife products so that then people, if they can't sell it, they're not going to continue harvesting. It's a circle. And Banton says this goes beyond just one animal or one species. It's just about being aware of what it takes for a natural resource to be pulled out from its habitat only to end up inside a living room, especially if the exploitation is based on unchecked and unethical practices, just so you can buy an object from a shop. Goyeneche suggests that people who want to buy shell products ask shop owners where they came from. If an item's origin is unknown, she urges not buying it. So I understand this. I don't know if I really agree with it, because I don't know if they'd be honest with you. The first time they might tell you, oh, I don't know. But then if they see that, okay, you don't buy it, next time they might just say, oh, it's local. I got these from Greece. They could be like, yeah, I got them from here. So I don't know if that's a viable solution. Anyway, I think that one of the most important things is people don't have information about where the product is actually coming from and how it might be harming the species and the environment. People may mistakenly think that someone just gathered shells lying on a beach rather than they've been obtained as part of an industrial scale enterprise. So about that, I remember when I was younger too, and there always used to be this stand with which this guy would dive, and he said he would find the shells, that he didn't kill any of them. And being younger, I really believed that. But looking back on that, I don't know how that's possible since he had so many and they were in such great condition. Maybe it was, hopefully it was, he was telling the truth. He doesn't sell his products here anymore. But as I said again about this, when I bought it, I didn't think that I'd be causing this much harm. First of all, as I said, I just thought that, 5 years is nothing. It's probably a fake. But even that, let's just say it was a fake. What does that mean too? What are the environmental impacts of a fake necklace? Or again, the ethical conditions people working for these are. So either way, it looks like this is not an ethical or sustainable purchase. And I'm very, very embarrassed to have it. And at the end of the article, it says, wildlife belongs in the wild, not in our houses. And I agree, or around our necks, or on us in any way. So what can we do now? If you're like me and have already bought it and didn't have bad intentions, I really didn't. I can acknowledge that it was a selfish purchase because I think a part of me knew that it's not a good idea, but I really wanted it, so I went and got it. So anyway, if you're like me and you bought it, what can you do now? I had this discussion with a friend when my other friend first told me about this, and I posted it, and she messaged me. She's like, that's terrible. I had no idea. What are you going to do? Are you going to continue wearing your necklace? Now, my original response was yes. I was like, yeah, I'm going to raise awareness on the issue, but you know what? I bought this. I'm going to use it. There's no point, since this whole thing already happened, for me not to wear it. But looking back, I don't know if that's the best because, for example, I'm raising awareness to my small circle of friends, families, and followers or viewers or whatever. But to the majority of people that see me, they just see this and think, oh, that's cute. Like, that's a cute outfit. I want something like that. It's very summery. It looks nice. So I'm actually promoting it. So unless every person that looked at me, I sat and told them the whole story. I think actually wearing this, even if it was fake, even if you got it cheap, even if you've wanted it for forever, it promotes this trade, this very unethical, unsustainable, cruel trade. So I think that the best thing would actually be to stop wearing it. Over dramatic. So, took forever to take out and half my hairs came up. But yeah, so as much as I think this is beautiful and as much as I've wanted it in the past, knowing now what it contributes and what it promotes for me wearing it, I will consciously decide to take this off and not wear it again. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want me to continue doing this kind of videos, please comment below and hit the like button. And if you have any articles on conservation, wildlife that you would want me to read and react to, also please either message me or post it below. See you next week. Bye.